Hello, welcome back. So it's been quite a while, but I guess that doesn't necessarily matter as long as you're watching the video. So today we're looking at the SetPower PT35. So this is a 12 volt compressor run, kind of like travel, fridge, freezer. So I got this for some road trips that we'll be doing, and actually just did one road trip where we had this thing running for 6 days. That includes 1 day of having it just running the night before. So it's done a pretty good job, and I'm just kind of doing a little bit of an overview as I'm going around it here. So you can see that it has intake in the front of it and kind of all over. I guess that's just, the compressor's right underneath the freezer here. Well, and I shouldn't say freezer just for this side, because both sides can be a freezer, both sides can be a fridge, or swap them around. So it doesn't necessarily matter, but I'm going to probably refer to this side, the left side, as the freezer, because that is the spot that I would use as the freezer and have it used as the freezer, because it's the smaller side. So as I was pointing out, it does have all this venting around it, and if I move around to the back side, you'll see that there's some more on the back. One thing I want to point out with that is that you don't want to have this particular freezer outside in the weather, as that is definitely going to get water in it. They do have some fridge styles like this where you have like a louvered vent system, where they can be in light rain, where they're not going to get the direct rain on it, and where this is definitely going to get the direct rain on it. Some of the things with this is that if you take a look at the display here, hopefully you can see it good in the camera. So you have your right side and your left side, and they refer to it as right bin, left bin, whatever. This is the temperature setting, whatever your desired temperature is. I have it set at 30, and then if it's anything other than what you're set at, it's going to display that. So right now it does have the fridge side down to 30, and I just turned this on probably about 10-12 minutes ago, and I'm hooked up to the EcoFlow right now through the 12 volt socket, and I'll get into that more a little bit later. But back to the display, on the cooling side for the freezer, like I said, I started this like 10-12 minutes ago, and it was at room temperature, probably around 70 degrees. So now it's down to 25, and the cooling goes all the way down to 0. So with that said, this is where I had it set, particularly was 30 degrees on the fridge side and 0 on the freezer, while we had it running for the 5 days. And I think maybe at one point, just for a couple of hours, I did knock it down to 28 degrees, and that might have been when I was running it without anything, or when I was putting stuff into it the night before to try and make sure that everything was cold enough. Anyway, it did a great job while we were traveling around, and it mainly spent most of its time, I shouldn't say most of its time, a lot of its time in the cab of my truck as we were driving. So when we got done each night, this would get unplugged and brought into where we were staying, and then plugged in there to the wall outlet. So it was never really unplugged for a long time. The one thing that I would only really complain about with its performance is, for instance, like I was saying, I call this side the freezer side because that's what I used. And you can see that I've got some stuff in there, and we'll talk about this guy in a little bit. But here's the freezer, and you can get a fair amount of stuff in there. We had this in here, which is for ice cubes. We had a couple little self-serve containers of ice cream, a couple Snickers ice cream things in there. I had a actual ice pack in there, just to be used as an ice pack, not for actually for in here, just to have for an ice pack. And then I can't remember what else was in there. We had a couple breakfast sausages and that type of thing in here. So I guess it was a fair amount of stuff. We had it fairly full in the freezer, as well as the fridge. But the thing that I wanted to get to, and I'm kind of jumping around here, is that when you have the freezer set all the way down to where it can go is at 0, if you do have any sort of ice cream products in there, your ice cream may be a little soft. And that's okay for like if you have those individual cups like I was talking about, or if you had an actual little ice cream container in there or whatever. But for the Snickers bar ice cream things that we had, those were a little soft, and that's obviously actually because there's so much sugar in those things, and that helps keep things from freezing. Anything that dissolves in water is going to hinder your freezing. So it would be nice if this went down to below 0. And I know that this is kind of like an entry level for a quality travel cooler. So with that said, you know, you're kind of getting a decent amount for what you pay for here. Anyway, that's really my only complaint about this fridge freezer setup. Now, going over to the EcoFlow, the reason why it's hooked up to the EcoFlow is because you can kind of see on the display, hopefully, right down here is showing how many watts is being output. Now, once this stabilizes, when it is running, it'll run at about 30 watts, whether it's plugged into 12 volts or plugged into 120. And then it doesn't run all the time once it gets everything cool and all that. The other reason why I have it hooked up to this is because this unit does not have a standalone battery. Now, you can get a battery for this that actually magnetically attaches to the cooler itself, and you can plug it into the battery that they provide. I'm not sure how long that battery will last for the one that they provide. I believe it's another $100 on top of what you pay for the cooler. And I didn't go that route because I do have the little EcoFlow right here. So what I did is I had the EcoFlow plugged into my truck while I was driving in the back seat on 110 AC current, and that would, keep this charged up, so that way the second that I shut the truck off, the battery, because everything flows through the battery on most of these EcoFlows, and I'm not trying to talk up EcoFlow. I'm not sponsored by SetPower or EcoFlow or anything like that, but most of these EcoFlows are what they call an uninterrupted power supply. And if you can see on the screen in the corner down there, you might be able to make it out that it says UPS, uninterrupted power supply. So it's continuously flowing through that, and so when the power gets cut off to powering this, there's no lag with taking over. Otherwise, if you had this plugged into your 12 volt socket in your car or whatever, or AC, whatever you've got, once you shut off your car in most vehicles, then this would go off, and then you'd have to manually turn this back on to get it to go. So it couldn't be like, oh, you turned off the car, I'm going to go into a store real quick, I'm going to buy something, and then I'm going to get in my car and turn it on. You have to remember to turn this back on. So that's why the EcoFlow is incorporated with this system. I guess there is one of the other things that I would say with this is the plug here, as you can see, it points to the front of the cooler. And what I've noticed with the way that I used it, most of the time when I had this setting on a counter or set up in the hotel room or wherever we were staying, that I would have it set up where the outlet was behind it. So then what that causes is that, you know, it's kind of a little bit of a small inconvenience, but it would just be nicer that you wouldn't have to put this bend in the cord, because I'm thinking for most people that they would want this turned around the opposite way, the way that this plugs in here. And that's the way it was set up in my truck, and that's the way it was set up, like I said, in the places that we were staying at while we were traveling. So also with the plug system, it does have a nice 110 hookup here, which incorporates the same plug from the cooler. So both of those plugs came with it, and this 12 volt is a really nice, it actually has multiple connections on it, and one of the very few 12 volt plugs that I see with multiple connections on it. And actually I'm just going to shut the cooler off so I can pull that out and show that to you. So usually on a 12 volt connection you have one of the connections over here and over here, but this one has them on the top and the bottom, and that's obviously to get a better connection. So it's really nice to have that, so you don't have to futz with it, because some of those outlets, especially on the older cars, they're kind of a pain in the butt, and you got to twist the cord around and everything to try and get it in a spot that it gets a good connection, and that makes it handy. So with that said, overall, I gotta make sure because I turned it off, just making sure. Overall, everything worked great. And my little complaint about the ice cream, it's not like the ice cream was melted on the candy bar side of it, the ice cream candy bars. It's not like when I opened the wrapper, it just totally fell apart. It was just a little soft. And ate it anyway and had a great time. The other thing that's on the display here is that you can set your compressor, or you can set it, I shouldn't say compressor, but that's over here. The compressor speed is over here. You can set the max or minimum. I did do a couple of test runs in my vehicle where I let this thing run off the EcoFlow while I was at work. And it seemed like there wasn't really a whole lot of difference that I could pick out between max and minimum with the amount of battery that it used for the EcoFlow. So, I mean, I know that's one day going to another day and there's temperature difference, but for the time that I used it, kind of testing it, I didn't really notice that it used it much quicker with the min or the max per se. I did notice, however, that because I have the option in my truck to plug in the AC or 12 volt, or obviously I think I did one day with the EcoFlow, and hold on, let me take that back. Every time I was hooked in to the 12 volt, okay, so I had the EcoFlow each time, but one time I was hooked into the EcoFlow with my AC on the side of the EcoFlow, and it seemed like when you had it on the 12 volt, just 12 volt directly connected, that it used a little less energy, and that would make sense because this is knocking your power down to 12 volts from 110. So this is eating up a little bit of power to do that. So I would say if you're worried about power consumption as you're traveling, try and do the 12 volt hookup. With that said, it does have basically a battery protection for whatever you're plugged into with a high, medium, and low setting. So right now I have it to low because, and I left it on low the whole time because I didn't, I knew that I wasn't going to be in a situation where I was going to have this running off the EcoFlow long enough while we were traveling to where I was going to run out of power. And that's basically on there for that case to where, like, how far do you want to run your battery down? And more often than not, you would want to consider that if you're directly plugged into the vehicle and you're going to be out of the vehicle for a long time. I guess most people would rather have what's inside the cooler go bad than have their car battery dead and not be able to go anywhere. So that's a nice feature to have on there. As far as the size of the bins go, let me grab my tape measure here. The one thing that I would like to see, and as this model of SetPower fridge freezer combination goes, where you have a standalone unit where you can't take out a divider, the bins widthwise, left and right and front and back, are going to be the same no matter if you go to the P45 or the P55. Like I said, this is the P35. So the only difference with that is the height of the actual height of the unit, where you get a deeper bins on there, and obviously a taller cooler. The one thing that would be nice is, for example, this is why I have this particular ice thing for ice. This isn't called the icebreaker, and I got this because it would fit in here. You're not going to be able to fit a regular ice tray with a cover. So you can, a lot of people buy a regular ice tray with a cover for like in their RV fridge. So that most of those don't fit in here. So you have to go to something like the icebreaker, or they have a couple other things for ice that you can check out online. Just know that that size space is going to be too small for a regular ice tray for that situation. So anyway, if you look in here with the tape measure, you got about a foot height-wise before you get into the space for the door, because the door has this little lip on it. And then I'll go across, and you got about 10.5 inches across and about 11.5. So that's on the big part of it. On the freezer, your depth is about 5.5 inches or so, and then going across this way, you're looking at 7.5, a little under 7.5, and your width-wise is going to be about 11.75, or a little less. So that's something to take into consideration when you're looking at these units. If that size is going to work for you, they do have these really nice LED lights. They're probably causing a problem on the camera, but that is very helpful when you have this in the vehicle and you're digging around in there, especially when it's at nighttime. Those are really nice to have, and those power on even if you don't have the fridge or the freezer running. So anyway, with that said, overall, for the amount of money that you pay for this, and I think I got this just under $300. For the money that you pay for this is a really good unit. So I guess with that said, I would go out and buy this unit again if I had to. Would I go bigger with it to a P45? I'm not sure, because once you get this loaded with whatever you're bringing in with it, plus the weight of the cooler altogether, it is a decent weight. So I guess it depends on your situation. Like, I guess a P45 or a P55 wouldn't be too big of a deal, but if you were not able, I would say if you're not wanting, I'm just guessing here, but if you had a P55 loaded up with food and everything, you're going to be well over 50 pounds, I would think. So I guess it just depends on your situation. Are you able to move a unit like that around? So if you're worried about the weight, I would stay with the smallest one, the P35. If weight doesn't matter and space doesn't matter, you don't go to the P55 or somewhere in the middle with the P45. Anyway, there we go. That's my review on the SetPower P35. Thank you for watching.